Well, welcome back to my channel, and it's a pleasure once again to have the man himself, the Aussie Cossack, on the show. Now, if you've been watching any of his channels recently, whether it be the Telegram channels or YouTube, you will have discovered that yesterday he had another run-in with the law. He wound up in the back of a divvy van in handcuffs and was carted off to a police station. Now, that's basically where the video ended. He's on the phone. Aussie Cossack, Simeon, I can't believe you wound up arrested again. Can you tell me, set up this whole thing? You attended a Liberal Party function yesterday afternoon and didn't get much further than the front door.
Oh, well, mate, it was an excellent, as Ricardo Bozier would say, act of the, what is it called? The
agent provocateur par excellence is how he explained it. An agent provocateur par excellence.
Well, I think that's what it was, what happened yesterday. This was some of the best political counter-campaigning that you can find going around at the moment. Now, it was a bit of a setup. We managed to, with our intel sources embedded deep within the Liberal Party, disaffected Liberal members, helping us, counter Fiona Martin's chances, because they refer to her as a left-wing Liberal person.
Right, yep.
That's what they refer to her as. And there's a good, honourable right-wing Liberal Conservative in the Liberal Party. Right. And they understand that the Liberal Party is sick, it's got a cancer, and it's been splintering away and dying slowly. Yeah. The whole Liberal Party is in jeopardy of imploding. The people there at Fiona Martin's campaign last night included Josh Frydenberg and senior Liberal representatives. And the whole function, the whole campaign was derailed by the Aussie Cossack. And the whole time, while Fiona was mumbling her speech, no one was even listening to her. Everybody was talking about, guess what?
Yep, the Aussie Cossack out the front with the row of police and and by the look of it, the security from the hotel standing in front of you too.
You're exactly right, my friend. That's exactly what happened. And from that point of view, it's an excellent operation that was conducted. And Liberal Party Fiona Martin, Member of Parliament, member for Reid, and the police government forces, they took the bait. And they reacted in exactly the same, you could say exactly the same way that the Aussie Cossack intended them to react. Note the word intended.
Yeah, sure.
This is just like walking into a trap. So first they send me an RSVP. Officially, Fiona Martin actually sent me an email confirming I'm invited to this event.
Right, okay.
From her email address, from her government email address. Right. At the bottom it says authorised by Fiona Martin. See, I live in Reid.
Right.
And she hasn't realised that she just invited me. And I received an RSVP. She even emailed me to confirm the morning of the day of the event to say, friendly reminder, finally, today's the day. Don't forget, be there prompt and early. I'm thinking, gee, she's keen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thinking, well, Fiona really wants me to go there.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And I'm a local constituent. I, printed this invitation off, put it into my pocket in a plastic cellophane seal, as to preserve it from the weather, should it, impede the delivery of this very important invitation to the hands of the doorman at the event.
Indeed.
So I was prepared, had the invite and everything. But when we got there, it was an ambush already set up, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You were met at the door, I believe. You didn't get even the opportunity.
The police were waiting at the door straight away. Hi, Simeon. As I walked another 3 meters into the venue, hit with a barrage of questions. Show us your vaccination pass. Show us your ID. And then 2 seconds later, show us your invitation to the event. And then 3 seconds later, sir, I'm asking you to leave the premises. And then 5 seconds later, my name is Constable Galar from Burwood Police.
Yep.
You're under arrest for failing to leave a licensed premises.
Yeah.
Right, this is all within the space of a few seconds, and the video is on YouTube. It must be the most bizarre and ridiculous example of the collaboration of political government candidates and law enforcement. Well, obviously, Fiona Martin has the backing of the deep state and the police state.
I've just been having a very interesting conversation with Fitzroy Sterling about some common law issues. We've recently done a video on constable and where constables came from and where police reside in all of this. And of course, the power resides with those who punish. That is how our current system works. Now, people didn't invent government so that it could have the power to punish the people. People need to understand that. And so you draw a very good analogy here, because this is exactly what's happening, and a great example of how the constable role has been perverted into what we currently call police. Because police are not constables today. They are policy enforcers. They only enforce the policy of the government of the day, and they use legislation to do it. So, like you say, Simeon, somebody woke up to the fact, I think, that your name was on the invite list, or they left it on deliberately, thinking they'd get some kind of gotcha moment on you. I don't know. That'd be pretty weird. But somebody, I think, a staffer probably eventually going through the list, had heart failure when they recognised Simeon Bolkov on the list, and put in place stoppages for you at the door. And of course, you must know most of these Burwood police officers by name now, don't you?
Well, it was very entertaining. In fact, the police had introduced themselves later, admitted to me that they're part of the proactive squad.
Wow.
Now, the proactive squad is not just two police sent out to do a liquor licensing check, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
If it was just two cops on the beat, there for the purposes of liquor licensing or, checking a venue, you'd have your sort of standard run-of-the-mill constables.
Yeah.
Now, these officers who were laying in wait were from the proactive squad. They were backed up by public protection officers, whatever they're called, the ones that guard the Prime Minister. Because of Frydenberg, he falls under that, his proximity to the Prime Minister. He's the treasurer.
That's right. Yeah,
so he falls under the Prime Ministerial sort of security ring.
Sure.
So they were there in civilian clothes with their badges neatly displayed on their belts and firearms at the ready. And we had a SWAT team in a dark black and a black Land Cruiser with tinted out windows.
Yep.
And that Land Cruiser was waiting there, ready to go. So they're ready for anything. These politicians.
Oh yes.
They're so paranoid, and the guilty conscience is probably so strongly laying into their minds. They know that they've done the wrong thing. That's the thing.
Yeah, they wouldn't
This is what
need
dictators
protection
do.
if they'd done the right thing. That's exactly right. If they had been doing the right thing, they wouldn't need protection.
Well, mate, the Aussie Cossack, can, as I like to refer to myself in third person, people know, can walk into any street, rally, riot, protest in Sydney, whether it be Brisbane, Melbourne, Newcastle,
yep,
Canberra, Ballarat, the entrance. The Aussie Cossack is always happy to walk with the people and talk with the people, interview them, and bring out their thoughts and feelings uncensored, and give the people a voice. When is the last time you actually saw a politician just walk out into the people? All of their events are all stunted and scripted.
Oh yeah, staged beyond belief.
It reminds me of the Potemkinsky Derevnya, and that's a Russian term for the villages of Potemkin. There was a historical Russian event where the leadership was due to visit a little village. And of course, to impress the Tsar, to impress the court, they quickly spent a whole bunch of money, planting green trees and giving the peasants bread and beer to eat, to fatten them up, to look like everything's going well in the village.
Yep.
And this is the fake impression that the Tsar got. Now, this is the same thing here. All of Fiona Martin's events are scripted, and all of these events ultimately are fails for her.
Yeah.
Because during this event, everybody just couldn't stop talking about the Aussie Cossack. All of the ministers, the treasurer, we've got intel from people that were there, journalists that were there, just locals that were there. And they say, no, everyone couldn't stop talking about the incident outside. Now, of course, the police manhandled me, and they grabbed me and cuffed me under the so-called Liquor Licensing Act.
Yeah.
Right? This is how they get you. They started with the unvaccinated pass. They went to the ID. Then they said, on the space of a few seconds. But that act says it refers to people who are intoxicated or quarrelsome or disorderly.
Yep.
Well, none of that was observed on my part, and the video clearly shows I was very
Mrs. Cossack,
willing to provide documentation, I even stated.
Mrs. Cossack needs to be commended on her video capabilities. Her camera
Mrs. Cossack did a great job.
Did a great job.
Mrs. Cossack, number one. She was very good to get the news out there. And could you imagine her husband's been taken away and she snaps into action?
Yes.
Mrs Cossack takes over the reins
Absolutely.
and updates the people while her husband is in the cells.
It must have been terrifying for her.
Well, she comes from a long lineage of military veterans, officers.
Stoic woman.
She's a very strong woman. Russian women in general are very strong.
I've heard that. I've heard that.
And she's a very lovely woman. And as the Daily Mail famously said, she's my glamorous wife.
That's right.
They also added she was a pro-Putin glamorous wife. Well, I don't know why they would. Why couldn't they just say glamorous wife? Why do they have to add the pro-Putin glamorous wife?
Oh, well, they've got to lay the groundwork to be able to associate her with him so they can ban her for everything, you see?
That's what they do. They get these AAP fact checks and they comb through your social media and they look for something that wasn't exactly accurate, for whatever reason. Maybe something you've reposted even from mainstream media. And then they say, oh, that's incorrect. They do it on climate change. They do it on the health mandate stuff and the GAB and, things like that. They censor heavily.
So,
but they can't.
You need to take me back to the divvy van. The last I saw of you, you were being unceremoniously de-tied because clearly you were a risk to yourself, handcuffed with the tie in the back of the van. Although, in the police defence, they may have driven you around a corner, your tie may have got caught on something inside the back there, and you may have unfortunately strangled yourself to death before they got you back to the police station. So I guess erring on the side of caution was very good on their behalf. They slid you back on your bum, by your feet, back in there, and you drove off into the sunset. So imagine you did eventually get back to the police station. Were charges actually laid, or did they say, listen, Simeon, just don't do this anymore?
Well, it's funny. They were considering a raft of charges, and we debated about it.
Oh, I bet you did.
And I said, we debated about it. And went back and forth. I was solicitor, barrister, and QC by the time we got out of there. And I said, look, gentlemen, we can go down the path of, making up a whole bunch of charges in the Aussie Cossack, such as, disorderly public nuisance, assault police, resist arrest. What else? Not leaving a licensed premises.
Yep.
Stalking, intimidation, something like that. They could have gone for the jugular.
Yeah.
If they wanted to. Right? But the thing is here, they're very afraid of public opinion themselves.
Well,
I told them, I said, do you really want to put Fiona Martin through this as the key Crown witness just before an election? Do you really want these to be headlines?
Yeah.
Do you really want all of this to be subpoenaed, including our conversations here on the side of the road?
Yeah.
Because, in their conversations.
Yeah, exactly.
They revealed.
I bet they did.
That Constable, I think it's Fideli, they said. I think it's Fideli. The one from the FPO video. Remember the apartment search and he's wearing his gangster hat?
Yeah, I knew I'd seen him before. Yeah.
Constable Fideli. Now, he gave a thumbs up, a like and subscribe. And he got a badge during the video.
Ah, great.
Now, Constable Fideli, because he did that, he's become a bit of a legend in the New South Wales Police Force.
Good on him.
And a lot of police actually are fans of the Aussie Cossack channel. So a lot of police actually enjoy watching these videos because they get a kick out of it.
Yeah.
Now, Fideli, as a going away present, by his command, by the police officers, and in front of the senior staff and the all of the brass of the New South Wales Police, was actually given a token going away present, and as for his promotion to detectives.
Wonderful.
And guess what it was?
Please tell.
A T-shirt with a photo of him and the Aussie Cossack from the YouTube channel, and a big thumbs up saying like and subscribe to Aussie Cossack channel. Can you believe it?
That's wonderful.
Now, if I'm telling fibs, I challenge the New South Wales Police to come out and say that that's not true. You're listening, Commissioner Carr and all the rest of you, but you know it's true. You know what happened.
Yeah.
And That is a fact of life, my friends.
That's very funny. So essentially what they did is they debated over the fact whether or not they would charge you with anything and, in fact, what they would charge you with just long enough so that the function could carry on without you being able to get back and try to get in again. Would that be
Exactly? Exactly. The moment the function was over, I was released.
Yeah. Thought
now,
that was the case.
This is what you call the political police.
Yeah.
This is if this was happening in another country, in a third world country overseas, Australia would have been one of the first nations to put its hand up and say, no, that's not right. You can't attack journalists, you can't arrest journalists. You know how many times Australia has criticised the international community, criticised China, criticised Indonesia, criticised Russia, criticised Iran, criticised half the countries in the Middle East and Africa, and half the countries in Eastern Europe. Australia's always the first. The Australian Foreign Minister and Prime Minister, they're always the first.
Yep.
Of course, the Australian people don't agree with the Foreign Minister and Prime Minister. They have completely different views. In fact, I've noticed that the Australian people are supporting Russia in this whole tragic conflict. Very terrible. It's a terrible tragedy for both sides. Indeed. It's a terrible war, between Russia and NATO. Russia says it's claiming an operation against Ukraine, but it's evident that NATO is at war with Russia. And today, the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister spokesperson, Maria Zakharova, actually announced that if missiles belonging to certain countries are being fired at Russian troops, Russia will consider it an act of war from those countries.
Yeah, well,
and that's fair enough. I mean, what's the difference between a Ukrainian operator launching a Dutch missile or a Dutch operator launching a Dutch missile? What's the difference?
Yeah, especially if that Dutch missile has only just arrived in country because, this is part of what Zelensky's been asking for, keep rearming us. I believe that there'll be no more SAMs going into Ukraine from the American stockpile because they've used as many as they're going to give up. Hasn't been a SAM missile made since 2003, apparently, and they take about 2.5 years to build. So,
Well, these missiles are very expensive, and Zelensky is, demanding 7 billion euros a month from the EU.
Yeah.
Like for pocket money, just to spend against Russia.
Yep.
And that's just EU. Then you take the Americans, NATO, the rest of NATO.
Yeah.
I mean,
we've sent them $130 million worth of stuff so far, or more. So yeah.
I guarantee you that wouldn't have even reached, those people in need. That would have been just stolen by Ukrainian officials, or there's so much corruption there. Scott Morrison sending hundreds of millions of dollars of Australian taxpayer money. He doesn't even know where it's going. Yeah. And if we had a royal commission into where those funds went, well, Scott Morrison and all these people in Frydenberg would have a lot to answer for.
Absolutely.
Because this is Australian taxpayer money that's funding Nazis, funding battalions who are committing atrocities, murdering civilians.
I'm not sure what else we have to do to be able to prove that term, that they are doing exactly as you say, funding Nazis. There's plenty of evidence available. There is plenty of evidence available, more evidence available of the fact that they are Nazis than there is evidence that there isn't. And yet people refuse to look. I think in some cases maybe they're a bit scared of what they're going to see, Simeon, and what that'll mean.
Well, I can guarantee you in Australia we live in a greenhouse in terms of information, right? And the information here, it's got a very tight seal and an atmosphere around it.
Yeah.
And the average Aussie doesn't get international news. He gets only the Murdoch news, the News Corp news.
Yep.
And that's all linked in with Big Pharma and big government.
Absolutely.
And, of course, defence. And defence prospers and profits when there's conflicts like this. Look, Scott Morrison sent money into that war, then he started sending missiles, then he started sending armoured vehicles, and now all of a sudden he's worried that we're going to get invaded. Yeah. So this 140 million turns into 3.5 billion, which he just announced for extra defence spending because they're worried about, new threats.
Yeah.
Well, if we're worried about new threats, why would we be getting involved in a war?
Certainly one with Russia. I can't understand that.
Well, Russia is the only country in the world that can actually stop China, have influence on China.
Yeah. Yep.
And, of course, Australia's concerned about China, and we've spoken about this before, Carl, on your program, the Solomon Islands fiasco.
Yes, unbelievable.
And we predicted that weeks ago. And now, look, it's mainstream media that this is now the main threat for Australia.
Yep.
The fact that there's going to be a Chinese base on the Solomon Islands.
Yep.
And the Australians have set a very, very bad precedent with their behaviour in the Ukrainian war. And I'm saying the Australian brass and the government and the foreign minister, not the Australian people. We know the Australian people don't see Russia as an enemy. The Australian people aren't interested in overseas conflicts. The Australian people don't want their taxpayer money funding missiles and bombs and tanks in, very dubious wars where it's not even clear who's the good guy and who's the bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Australian people, you do the pub test, that's what they'll tell you. Yeah, they might think Putin's a bit of a boss and he's a very strong leader, and they'll tell you that, and they'll say that all of this Russian propaganda is just sickening. People are sick of hearing anti-Russian propaganda on the news, on the mainstream media. It's called Russophobia, and it's racist, and it's basically racism. So in Australia, you can say anything you like about Russians or threaten them in any way you like, and it's fine. You try doing the same with other nationalities. I'm not going to name them, but you try and say a word or even 1% of what you say against Russians here.
Yeah.
Oh, they will be up in arms.
Yep.
They'll all be up in arms. And, Russia is very respectful in that regard. There are many nationalities in Russia that live there. In the Russian peacekeeper force, there are Muslims, there are Buddhists, there are Christians, there are Orthodox majority. There are many different nationalities. And Russia is a multinational country.
Yep.
Just like Australia, multinational or multinationality.
Yeah.
I think there's 140. I think I've asked
Wow.
my wife. How many nationalities in Russia? That's 152, my wife says.
Wow, okay.
Nationalities in one country. So very similar to Australia. Very similar to Australia in that regard.
And a very diverse cultural mix that have been able to live relatively peacefully for a great deal of time without the influence of NATO coming in and knocking on their doorsteps, which obviously has upset Russia since the USSR, if you like, was dissolved. So, it's a serious time ahead. Simeon, I can't thank you enough for coming on and having a bit of a chat today. I know you're a busy man. There's probably somewhere else you need to go and do a little bit of that counter, what are you calling it, counter campaigning?
Counter-campaigning, yes. Counter-campaigning, it's a new trending hashtag that's going around social media, and everyone's invited to do it. You don't have to be qualified. In fact, the more unqualified, the better. This is a people's movement, and this is happening right across the country. Counter-campaigning, the main rules and aims are we don't break the law. We do everything in a very smart and witty way, and we keep them guessing. We stay ahead of their functions, their letterbox drops, their campaigning days, and we counter-campaign. We exercise our democratic rights to ask them questions.
Yeah.
To film the politicians. We've been filming the police, FTP. FTP applies to politicians. Film the politicians.
Yep.
And especially the sitting members. We should do our best to disrupt the campaigns of all of the sitting members. Because all of the sitting members are the ones that have been responsible for the disastrous government policies of the last 2 years.
Yep.
And we don't care who gets in as long as these people get out. We need to support all of the independent candidates out there.
That's
now,
right.
I'm appealing to the people who have been voting Liberal and Labor for the last 30, 40 years of their life. It's just as a tradition. That's just a family tradition in many cases. In many cases, it's just a habit. Guys, Liberal and Labor are the same two parties that have caused the last 2 years for us. Just think back to what everyone's family had to go through. For what? For nothing. Terribly handled, bungled response to what was essentially a campaign of coercion and the restrictions on freedom and police intimidation.
Yeah.
And that is very un-Australian.
And both sides of politics were 100% gutless. I don't know how many times I saw ScoMo stand up and say, we're not going to make sure that vaccines are compulsory, and compulsory vaccination is not something that this government will do, and Albo was the same. Well, of course not. But the bureaucrats, the unelected, faceless bastards who set policy for things like the health department, they make a mandate that says people have got to wear a mask, people have got to stay home, people have got to do this, people have got to do that. Well, they have no power to make such a thing. And if people, even for 1 second, woke up enough to go and do a definition search on the word mandate before Google changed it, If you do a Google search now, they've changed the definition of the word mandate, but there are still real definitions of the word around. People would understand that the only way a mandate works is if you agree to comply to it. It's not compulsory. It doesn't mean compulsory. This, to me, I'm sure, even for people whose second language, Simeon, and Russian, I guess, is your second language, but people don't inquire. They don't understand the meaning of the word, and that's why words are so important. We think they mean one thing. They've changed them in a lot of cases in the legalese to mean something completely different. Most cases opposite what you think they mean. And this is what they're doing to us. This is how they stymie us. The government and the opposition both wash their hands of responsibility because they're not the ones doing it to us. It's the health department. It's the science. It's the doctors. It's bullshit. That's what it is. And it has to stop. The only way it's going to stop is if you elect independents above any sitting member into this coming parliament. And they unite to change the laws. Because anything a government created, any law, any legislation, a government can uncreate. And the people can find out the truth. But only if you elect enough of us into Parliament to do it. Betty, you and I aren't running really, Simeon, eh?
Well, we are running. We're running our mouths.
Yeah, that's true. Something we are good at.
And look, it's important we do so because lots of people out there are willing to accept the counter-narrative. Lots of people out there are searching for the alternative narrative. They're so sick to death of the deep state narrative, which is being pushed and spun on us every single day.
Yep.
And they even openly, you hear often on the news, they actually say, and the narrative on this one is, and that's the narrative. Yep. And the narrative is, and they so forth and so forth. So they're actually subliminally, they're so used to following the narrative that they talk about it.
Yep.
You've heard them say it. And the narrative is, of course, controlled and shaped and enforced even, sadly, by the deep state.
Yeah.
And that's who we need to fight here. That's who we need to fight. We need to fight for Australia. We need to fight for Australian sovereignty, for our country, for our manufacturing.
Yep.
So Australia doesn't get involved in other overseas wars, but it increases its own, defensive capability through armed neutrality.
We need to fight for our fuel security. We don't need to,
Absolutely.
We do not need fuel coming from other parts of the world. We can create enough fuel for Australia here in Australia. What we need is more refineries.
Absolutely. And that would, of course, help Australian jobs and get people back to work.
Help Australian manufacturing at every level. We don't have big industry here anymore. We might need skilled migrants to come in. I don't see that that's a bad thing. If we don't have the talent left in our skill set here in the country, let's get the people in who can help us do it. I'm all for, how the French were so upset that we took the contract for the French submarines off them? Well, I've got a cure for that. Let's get them on a contract to actually get a fast train working. They have them. They know how to make them. They know what makes good fast trains and what don't. Let's start talking about how you can help benefit Australians and the rest of us here with something like that. Something that people can make use of, because God knows you don't ever get to see a bloody submarine let it go for a ride on one, as much as we might like to. So they could help us out with something like that. A little bit of lateral thinking from the people in government would be bloody amazing, Simeon.
Unfortunately, we need to change the government to achieve any change at all. If it's back to Liberal and Labor, one's worse than the other. They're both as bad as each other. And, I shudder to think what a Labor government would be like. We're already left as far as we can be.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be a right-wing Liberal government.
Yeah.
So imagine the lefties get in. Then we're completely stuffed.
Oh, God, yeah, mate. We're dead in the water. Dead in the water. And dead in the water forever, sadly, if that happens. Simeon Bolkoff.
I'm not sorry, just to clarify, I'm not talking about the old school lefties.
No.
They're the ones who believed in the Labor Party and the unions and those fundamental Labor principles. I'm talking about this new generation of, these Labor woke lefty people that are infecting the Labor Party. There are strong divisions within the Labor Party as well.
Yeah, they've come straight out of
factions within the Labor Party.
Come straight out of woke university after being brainwashed for 3 to 7 years, depending on which arts degree they did, and matched it with a law degree, because don't they all? And then they come straight into politics. All that time in university, their second job is working as a staffer for some local state politician or some local council election, trying to get a bit of use or get a bit of experience in how you tell lies to the public from the ground up, because that's all they learn, and they never have a job. None of these people, particularly in the Labor Party, have ever had a real job. They've all just gone from university to working for politicians to becoming a politician. You know, that's the last thing that we, the people, need in our parliament.
Absolutely. And look, that's the problem with the Labor Party, that they've actually been slowly hijacked by the very woke left. And there's the problem for you. So it's a very bleak outlook unless people really stop voting Liberal and Labor. At the very minimum, guys, every vote that goes to a different party, for example, a minor party or an independent, best is independence.
Yeah.
You know, all the parties are as bad as each other, to be quite honest. Oh, the LDP might be a good party because that eventually might replace the Liberal Party, hopefully.
Yeah, it may.
So for the Senate, man, no problems. I can recommend John Ruddock as a good candidate to vote for. Hopefully, John Ruddock gets more votes than the UAP Senate candidate, Dominic Martinez, virtually non-existent, virtually no profile. Nobody knows who he is. But the UAP are running a dud candidate as a Senate one ticket for some strange reason. You know, he's got no will to win and he's not interested. You know, he hasn't made one effective speech or, you know, never appeared on the radar anywhere as a campaigner. It's very, very strange circumstances. There's a merchant banker running in the Senate number 1 seat.
Wow,
so I don't think it's a good idea. I do not think it's a good idea to vote UAP in the Senate. Better off voting for independence or, because they probably won't get up the independents, it's best to concentrate your votes with One Nation or the Liberal Democrats Party.
Yes, I think if you don't understand the preferential voting system, you need to go and learn it. Learn how your vote actually works. Learn where your candidates, the ones you want to vote for, are preferencing your vote, and make your vote work for you. The best way to do that is to put the sitting member last in every circumstance, and put the independent of your choice at the top, the second independent of your choice underneath that, the third independent of your choice underneath that. And from there, we will have the opportunity to really have some success. Bear in mind, we only need to gain a majority of, we only need a majority of 1, but if we could gain 10, 12, 15, then we control what happens in that parliament, and anything that government made can be unmade. The people will learn the truth. That's what we are aiming for.
Absolutely.
Simeon, thank you very much for joining me. I'm really looking forward. Did Mrs Cossack actually standing there wiping the tears away on the other side of the street as you were led out the front doors of the police station and allowed to go home? Is there video of that reunion?
Well, there's a video of her saying goodbye. It's very emotional for Mrs Cossack.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was great. I was in very good spirits. This is exactly what I wanted, in fact. They keep repeating the same mistakes, don't they, the police?
Yeah, they certainly do. Enforcing policy, which is not what police do. The constable's role is to look after the people, not enforce policy.
Well, the constable, if it was any mainstream media journalist, they would never have done that.
Yeah, you're right. Yep.
You know, if you walked in there with a Channel 7 badge, you'd be no problems.
Yeah. I love the way
or an ABC.
Love the way people are trying to draw a distinction between journalists and people like you and I.
Well, mate, if it looks like a journalist, walks like a journalist, and talks like a journalist, it's probably a journalist.
Yeah.
You go in with a camera crew with a media pass around your neck with a journalist mic with your brand on it.
Yep.
And everyone knows what I'm there for.
Yeah.
You know, I'm there to bring the entertainment and bring the truth. And fortunately, on this channel, we're able to mix the two, combine the two.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
Entertainment and truth, and that's I think what the viewers love and what the channel is really experiencing this big growth on Telegram, YouTube. Of course, they've shadow banned the numbers, but millions of people are watching on YouTube. Millions. Yeah. They just skewed the numbers there.
Well, hopefully a few of them will pop up on my channel now that you've ordained to show your face on it. That's awesome. We'll see what happens from here. Simeon, thanks for talking. We'll have you on again real soon.
Join Carl's channel, subscribe in the link below, guys, and it's a great way to keep up to date. Just in case Simeon's taken out of commission, I entrust Carl Leopold to continue spreading the word.
Thank you,
in fact, if I get locked up, I'll put your phone number down and we'll do 6-minute interviews every 3 days over the jail phone.
Absolutely. I'm up for that. Absolutely. 100%.
No worries.
All right. Stay safe.